Hi, lovely and darling viewers. It's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing Aquaman Volumes 1 and 2, The Drowning, and Black Manta Rising. These are part of DC Rebirth. Volume 1 covers issues 1 through 6 and Aquaman Rebirth number 1. Volume 2 covers issues 7 through 15. Art and writing on the series are by Dan Abnett, Scot, Eaton, Brad Walker, and Philippe Briones. Those names are down in the description below, and I'm going to do Volume 1 first and then do a review of Volume 2. I'm going to try to keep these spoiler-free, but Volume 2 definitely builds off of what is happening in Volume 1, and so if you're going to read them in order. So, Volume 1, The Drowning. In this, we kind of get another introduction to Arthur Curry, who is Aquaman. He is the king of Atlantis, so he is the head of state of a pretty big country. Atlantis exists entirely underwater, and he's in charge of these humanoids. Basically, they're humans that have evolved to live underwater. Aquaman also has some special powers, like his trident thing, and the fact that he can influence animals, like sea creatures. So, Arthur Curry is also a member of the Justice League, and he is part human, part Atlantean. One of his parents is American from the shore, and one of his parents is from Atlantis. So he feels kind of stuck between these two worlds, and his main goal is to, well, first protect Atlantis, but secondarily his goal is to bring peace and bridge this gap between life on land and life in the sea. So Aquaman, unfortunately, is kind of a joke. Not only in our world, but also Dan Abnett plays with that idea in these comics, with how the people on land see him, and even people within Atlantis maybe not necessarily giving him full respect that he should get as their sovereign. And Arthur also feels kind of out of place even within the Justice League. Like, he specifically talks about this golden trio of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and then there's this other trio that includes the Flash and the Green Lantern and Cyborg, maybe, but he's I don't really quite fit in with either of these groups either, and so he's kind of this fish out of water no matter where he is. So I really liked seeing Arthur's identity struggles in these comics and exploring that side of him, and him trying to balance everything, being the king of Atlantis and ruling that country, but also being part of the Justice League and feeling this connection to land. So actually, I really enjoyed this look at Aquaman. So also in these comics, Mera, who is Arthur's fiance, romantic interest, partner, totally plays a big role in these comics, and she's totally kick-ass. I love her. If I knew about Mera beforehand, I probably wouldn't have waited as long to read Aquaman in the first place. I love her. She's strong and independent, but also supportive, and they totally love each other. They are crazy insane in love. I love their romance. So in these comics, Arthur is trying to build a embassy kind of off the American shoreline that will be this place where people from the land and the sea can come and talk and get to know each other better, and hopefully Atlantis will be able to take a bigger part in international relations and world politics type stuff. That's really Arthur's goal, is for people on the land to take Atlantis seriously and for Atlantis to get a say in what's happening on the Earth, because they are one country of the Earth but aren't treated that way. So at the same time that Arthur is trying to get this embassy going, there is a terrorist group in Atlantis called the Deluge, and they're trying to dethrone Arthur and destabilize relations with the land people, and kind of want to take back Atlantis being its own separate country that doesn't need help from anybody and controls the waters completely. So Arthur's trying to fight that because it goes against his let's be part of the bigger world stage thing. We also see Black Manta appearing, and I honestly didn't know anything about Black Manta other than his costume and the fact that he's Aquaman's main enemy. So it was cool to find out about Black Manta's backstory, why he hates Aquaman in the first place. We also start to see tensions are already bad between the United States and Atlantis, but the deluge is not helping. So tensions start building in this comic towards this war. Art-wise in these comics, it's kind of inconsistent. Like there's too many artists working on this series, and like every issue has a slightly different art theme going on with it, which I'm not totally digging. They're not like horrible art either. Like there's nothing that I'm like, I hate this. There are a lot of fight scenes in these comics, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but I have enough interest in Arthur as a character that it didn't bother me as much as it could have. This particular volume, Volume 1, isn't quite as bad. Volume 2 just seems like it's all fighting. On the whole, I gave Volume 1 a 3-star rating. Maybe it's more like a 3.5-star rating. I'm interested in Arthur as a character, but I'm not necessarily interested in these plot points and all these different tensions and things that are happening. So it's a pretty solid read if you want to get into Aquaman. This is a good approach to it. It's interesting. I'm not overly madly in love with it, though, the way that I am with like Superman and Batman comics. So it's kind of a take it or leave it thing. But I'm definitely glad that there is this run of Aquaman and its approach, and that it is a really good jumping on point if you have not read Aquaman before. So Volume 2, Black Manta Rising, definitely builds off of Volume 1, The Drowning. So definitely read Volume 1 first. In this one, Black Manta reappears, hence the title of this comic, and he definitely wants to take Arthur down and has some major revenge issues stuff going on here. We also have this secret shadow organization called Nemo that is trying to pull the strings and orchestrate a war between Atlantis and the US, which ends up breaking out. Arthur wasn't trying to get into a war with the US. He did not sanction this at all. This is not something coming from the official leadership, but the US has been attacked and are blaming Atlantis for it. And so major fighting going on in this comics. Also, we have the Justice League making an appearance and them questioning whether or not they can help Arthur. Like, that's their friend, and they're all about truth and figure out what's actually happening. But on the other hand, this is an international war, and can they really step in? And most of them are Americans, so a lot of internal conflict between the Justice League. We also see a new type of soldiers appear called the Aquamarines. These are US Marines that fight in the water, which I thought was kind of cool. Maybe not so cool if you're the one fighting them. And then we also have Mara having her own storyline where she goes to this sisterhood of widows, and they are tasked with preparing her to be queen and testing her to make sure that she's worthy. And Mara finds out this prophecy, and she has to decide whether or not to put stock in this prophecy and act according to what she knows, or if she should just pass it off and keep doing her thing. And so the whole prophecy and whether or not to trust it kind of plays into her relationship with Arthur and whether or not she's helping in this war. That's probably all I can tell you that is not spoilery about this comic. Trying to decide what isn't actually a spoiler in this comic series. So here's the Justice League. Yeah, this one has a ton of fighting. It's definitely very political, war-centric, and I wasn't really a huge fan of this, but at the same time, I was very invested in Arthur's plight and his struggles, and what he's fighting for, and also the grand scale of this. It's a very global fight, kind of Atlantis against everybody else. So the stakes are high, which I ended up liking. I didn't think that I would. So this one, Volume 2, Black Manta Rising, is definitely a solid 3 stars, mostly because I kind of felt conflicted about whether or not I was enjoying reading this war happening or not. I gave both of these 3 stars on Goodreads, but definitely Volume 1 is better. I enjoyed it more, probably more like a 3.5 stars, but I just couldn't give it the 4 stars, honestly. So yes, I am recommending Aquaman if you guys are wondering. Yes, they're 3 stars, but they're also pretty solid like attempts at it. Aquaman's like a difficult character to, I think, get into. Like, he doesn't have the publicity and backstory that Superman or Batman does. We're like, hey, I know those guys without even reading the comics. So this was definitely an introduction to Aquaman for me. Like, what I knew from him was all from cartoons and his very, very brief appearance in Batman vs. Superman. Yeah, I kind of liked getting into this and knowing and finding out who Arthur Curry is, and I liked him a lot more than I thought I was going to. Like, I can see the appeal in him, even if I'm not a huge fan of oceans and the underwater stuff. That's kind of my very jumbled review. Hopefully this makes sense to you guys. Feel free to ask me questions and clarifying if I totally just rambled and you didn't understand. So let me know in the comments below if you've read this or thinking about reading this, or what your opinions are on Aquaman in general. So peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. Bye.